my house and there's nothing wrong
We
here.
are hearing noises from inside your house.
No, there's nothing like that.
We need to check inside now.
At exactly 7:32 p.m., a quiet doorbell rang. And within hours, it would destroy careers, expose a massive corruption ring, and prove that truth can bring even the most powerful to their knees. Two police officers stood at the door. One quiet house, one fabricated lie. Before we continue, subscribe to this channel, because stories like this don't just entertain. They reveal the kind of truth some people would do anything to hide. This is the story of Judge Rebecca Lawson. And a night of fake noise complaint became a national scandal. Judge Rebecca Lawson was no ordinary homeowner. By day, she wore the quiet authority of a federal circuit court judge, respected, feared by corruption, and known across the legal world for one thing above all else: zero tolerance for misconduct. She believed the law only worked when it treated everyone the same. That night, she was just Rebecca. No robe, no courtroom, just a cup of untouched tea cooling on the kitchen counter, a lamp glowing softly, and the stillness of a home at rest. Then came the knock. Not loud, not urgent, but heavy enough to carry intent. Rebecca glanced at the clock. Nearly midnight. She opened the door to find two uniformed officers standing stiffly on her porch, hands resting a little too close to their belts. "Ma'am, we've received multiple noise complaints." Rebecca blinked once. Behind her, the house was silent. No music, no voices, no television, the kind of quiet you could almost hear. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake," she said calmly. "There's no noise here." One officer stepped forward, peering past her shoulder as if searching for proof that didn't exist. "Mind if we come in and check?" The request wasn't really a request. Rebecca felt it then, that subtle shift in the air. The calm professionalism she was used to seeing in courtrooms suddenly replaced by something tighter. Sharper. She straightened. "On what grounds?" The second officer's jaw clenched. "We're just doing our job, ma'am." Her heart didn't race. Her voice didn't shake. But something inside her clicked into place. Because she had seen this tone before. Used it herself, when attorneys tried to push without evidence. Except this time, she wasn't on the bench. She was standing barefoot in her own doorway, being questioned for a crime that didn't exist. The officers exchanged a look, the kind that doesn't need words. The pressure thickened. The silence grew heavier. And that's when Rebecca Lawson understood the truth. This knock had nothing to do with noise. It was about who they thought she was, not who she actually was. And in that moment, a woman who had spent her life protecting the law realized. The law was about to test itself at her door. Rebecca Lawson didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She didn't flinch. She asked a single, simple question, one she had asked countless times from the bench, a question that had protected citizens and condemned misconduct alike. "Do you have a warrant?" The words hung in the air, calm but immovable. For a fraction of a second, the officers hesitated. Then the taller one shifted his weight forward. His boots slid into the narrow gap between the door and the frame. Not enough to be subtle. Not enough to be accidental. Enough to stop her from closing the door. Rebecca felt the chain tighten, then snap. The sound was sharp, final. Before she could step back, the door swung open, and the officers crossed the threshold of her home. Uninvited. Unlawful. "This is my residence," she said, her voice firm now. "You are not authorized to enter." The officer waved a hand dismissively. "Ma'am, relax. If you've got nothing to hide, this won't take long." Rebecca's pulse remained steady, but her mind was already moving faster than the men in front of her. Because they had just done something irreversible. They had crossed a line the Constitution drew in ink and blood, and they didn't even realize it. She took a slow step back, allowing them space, not because she had to, but because she wanted the record to be clean. What they couldn't see was the small, dark device resting silently on the bookshelf in the hallway. Recording. Every word, every step, every violation. The camera had been installed months earlier after breaking down the street. Rebecca barely thought about it anymore. But tonight, it was watching everything. "State the reason for your entry," she said. The officer's eyes scanned the room. Neat, orderly, painfully ordinary. No signs of chaos. No noise. No evidence. Noise complaints, he repeated, less confidently this time. Rebecca met his gaze. There is no exigent circumstance. No warrant. No consent. You are trespassing. That's when irritation turned into offense. You got an attitude, ma'am, the second officer said. Step back. She didn't. I am invoking my rights, Rebecca replied. The taller officer stepped closer, his voice dropping. We can make this a lot harder if you keep pushing. That sentence, that tone, was one she had punished in court more than once, and she felt something colder than fear settle in her chest. She took a breath. You need to leave. Now. Instead of complying, the officer reached toward his radio. Rebecca understood then that logic wasn't going to stop this. So she did the one thing they clearly didn't expect. She identified herself. My name is Rebecca Lawson, she said evenly. I am a federal circuit court judge. Badge number and names now. The room went quiet. For half a heartbeat, she thought that might be enough. That professionalism would finally kick in. That embarrassment would do what reason could not. It didn't. The taller officer laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. Yeah, he said. And I'm the president. The second officer smirked. You expect us to believe that? Rebecca felt the weight of it then. Not disbelief. Dismissal. She reached for her phone slowly, deliberately. You are being recorded. This interaction is being documented. That's when their posture changed. Not toward caution. Toward control. Put the phone down, one officer ordered. I'm within my rights. The words barely left her mouth before the officer grabbed her wrist. The contact was brief, but it was everything. Because at that moment, the incident stopped being a misunderstanding. It became a case. A case built on a legal entry. Unlawful detention. Use of force without cause. And worse, escalation in the face of lawful resistance. Rebecca didn't resist physically. She didn't need to. She stood her ground, eyes steady, voice clear. I am warning you, she said. What you are doing will end careers. That's when the officer tightened his grip. You should have just cooperated. And in that instant, captured cleanly on camera, time-stamped and undeniable, a legal disaster was set in motion. Not for Rebecca Lawson, but for the men who had mistaken her silence for weakness, and her identity for a lie. Despite the leather-bound judicial ID in her hand, despite the calm, unmistakable authority in her voice, despite the law standing clearly on her side, they put the handcuffs on her anyway. Cold metal closed around Judge Rebecca Lawson's wrists inside her own living room. The same room where she had written opinions that shaped lives, overturned wrongful convictions, and disciplined officers for misconduct. This is a mistake, she said quietly. You are arresting a sitting judge. The officer avoided her eyes. Turn around. The click of the cuffs echoed louder than the knock that had started it all. Outside, porch lights flicked on one by one. Curtains shifted. Doors opened. Neighbors stepped out in pajamas and disbelief. Phones rose into the air. Someone whispered, "Isn't that the judge from downtown?" Another voice followed, louder now. "Why are they arresting her?" Rebecca was guided, no, paraded, out of her home as if she were dangerous. She wasn't resisting. She wasn't shouting. She was standing tall, shoulders back, dignity intact. But the damage was already unfolding in real time. Across the city, a courthouse clerk recognized her name as it came over the radio. A bailiff froze mid-step. A senior judge stared at his phone in silence before saying two words that spread like wildfire. Oh no. Emergency calls flooded the courthouse. Internal affairs supervisors were woken from sleep. A chief of police demanded body cam access immediately. And still, the officers kept going. They placed Rebecca in the back of the patrol car. The door slammed shut. Inside the car, for the first time that night, Rebecca felt something twist in her chest. Not fear, recognition. She knew this moment. She had seen defendants sit exactly where she was sitting now, confused, unheard, humiliated, while officers swore they had no choice. She had believed the system corrected itself. Tonight, she was learning how long that correction could take. One officer leaned into the front seat. We're past the point of undoing this. The other nodded. If we let her go now, it's our heads. That was the truth they never said out loud. This wasn't about law enforcement anymore. It was about ego, about pride, about the terrifying realization that backing down would mean admitting they were wrong, and that everything captured on camera would prove it. So they doubled down. At the station, Rebecca was processed like any other suspect. Fingerprinting, mugshot, charges read aloud that didn't fit the facts. Unlawful disturbance, obstruction, resisting. She listened without interrupting, because she knew something they didn't. Every second of this night was documented. Every command, every refusal to verify her identity, every warning ignored. And outside those walls, the truth was already moving faster than the paperwork. By morning, the footage would surface. By noon, names would be known. And by nightfall, the same system that had just failed her would come crashing down on the people who chose pride over the law. They had arrested the wrong woman, and the law was about to remind them what that costs. The police station never slept, but that night it held its breath. Rebecca Lawson sat alone on a cold bench, hands finally free, posture unchanged. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow over walls that had seen thousands of suspects pass through. None like her. A junior officer walked past the holding area, glanced up, and stopped dead. He looked again, then closer. The color drained from his face. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He turned on his heel and walked fast. Too fast to be casual. Minutes later, a door at the end of the hall burst open. A senior lieutenant stepped out, mid-conversation, phone still pressed to his ear. He froze the moment he saw her. Judge Lawson. Rebecca stood. Yes. The word hit the room like a dropped glass. The lieutenant swallowed hard. Why is she back here? No one answered him, because suddenly everyone knew. Whispers rippled through the station. That's her. Federal Circuit Judge. The one from misconduct cases. The one who shut down internal affairs excuses. An officer at the desk began typing frantically, pulling up reports that should have been routine. Noise complaint, address, time, caller ID. Nothing. He refreshed. Still nothing. He searched again. Broader this time. No dispatch record. Number 911 call. No anonymous tip. No logged disturbance. His fingers slowed, then stopped. Lieutenant, he said quietly. There's no call. The lieutenant frowned. What do you mean, no call? I mean, the officer turned the screen. There was never a noise complaint. There's no report. No record. Nothing. The lieutenant stared, then swore under his breath. Phone started ringing. Not with routine chatter, but with the kind of sharp, clipped urgency that only came when something had gone very wrong. Calls were placed upward, to the shift commander, to internal affairs, to the chief of police, then higher, the mayor's office, the district attorney. Every call began the same way. We have a situation. Rebecca watched it all unfold with quiet clarity. This was the moment she knew the truth had outrun the lies. Because lies require cooperation, and cooperation had just ended. The officers who arrested her stood apart now, stiff, silent, suddenly very aware of the walls closing in. The taller one tried to speak. There must be a system error. Stop, the lieutenant snapped. Do not say another word. An internal affairs investigator arrived within the hour, suit rumpled, eyes sharp. Body cam footage, she said. Now. The room went still. The footage played. Every step, every command, every refusal to verify identity. The foot in the door, the snap chain, the handcuffs, and then the moment that ended everything. Rebecca's voice, calm and unmistakable. I'm a federal circuit court judge. You are being recorded. The investigator paused the video, rewound, played it again. No ambiguity, no confusion, no excuse. What justification did you have to proceed? She asked. Silence. She leaned back in her chair. You fabricated a call to initiate contact. You forced entry without a warrant. You escalated after identity verification. You made an arrest without probable cause. She looked directly at the officers. This is no longer a policy violation. The words landed with finality. This is criminal behavior. The chief of police arrived just after dawn. He didn't ask questions. He watched the footage once, then stood jaw tight. Badge numbers, he said. Now. The officers complied with shaking hands. Suspensions were issued on the spot. Weapons secured. Badges collected. One of them tried again. Chief, you thought you could get away with it. The chief cut in. And now you're done. Rebecca was escorted out of the holding area. Not as a suspect, but with apologies trailing behind her. I'm so sorry, Judge Lawson, the lieutenant said. This should never have happened. She met his eyes. No, it shouldn't have. Outside, the sky was turning pale blue. Morning had arrived, and with it consequences. Within hours, the story broke. Federal judge illegally arrested in her own home. No noise complaint ever filed. Body cam footage confirms fabrication. The public reaction was immediate and furious. Protests formed outside the station. Civil rights groups demanded indictments. Legal scholars called it one of the clearest abuses of power caught on camera in decades. And then came the charges. Falsifying police reports, unlawful entry, false arrest, civil rights violations under color of law. The officers who had once stood confidently in uniform now stood before a judge, not Rebecca, but one who knew her well. The irony was not lost on anyone. The prosecution laid it out plainly. This began with arrogance, the DA said. But when the defendants realized their mistake, they chose escalation over accountability. They doubled down. They lied. And they believed their badges would protect them. He paused. They were wrong. Rebecca testified only once. She didn't dramatize. She didn't embellish. She spoke with the same measured tone she had used for years, not as a victim seeking revenge, but as a guardian of a law demanding truth. This case isn't about me, she said. It's about what happens when authority believes it is untouchable. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. The verdicts were unanimous. Guilty. Sentencing followed months later. 8 years in federal prison. Careers erased. Pensions forfeited. Names forever tied to a moment when power met accountability and lost. As Rebecca walked out of the courthouse that day, reporters shouted questions. How does it feel, Judge Lawson? She stopped, turned, and answered softly. The law worked, she said, but only because the truth was recorded. She paused, then added, and because someone finally believed a woman standing in her own doorway had rights worth defending. The lie had fallen apart, and in its ruins, justice stood, quieter than outrage, stronger than fear, and finally undeniable. What federal investigators uncovered in the weeks that followed was far more disturbing than a single night of misconduct. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. And it certainly wasn't isolated. As subpoenas were issued and devices seized, a pattern began to emerge, one that had been hiding in plain sight, protected by silence and uniforms. Text messages told the first story. Screens filled with casual cruelty. Jokes about easy stops. Comments about nice houses for people like them. Then came the files. Target lists. Addresses of successful black residents, judges, doctors, business owners, flagged for random checks. Surveillance photos taken without warrants. Notes documenting who lived where, when they left, when they returned. Badge numbers attached to intent. Federal agents moved quietly, methodically, following the evidence where it led. And it led deep. A small network of officers had been abusing their authority for years, fabricating calls, escalating encounters, pressuring residents into silence. Most victims complied. Some complained. A few moved away. None had proof. Until Rebecca Lawson. The body cam footage from her arrest became the key that unlocked everything else. Because once the lie at her door was exposed, every previous noise complaint, every suspicious activity stopped, every uncooperative resident report tied to those officers was re-examined. Cases unraveled. Charges were dropped. Settlements reopened. Apologies issued too late. Families who had once believed they were alone learned they weren't. One man wept as he spoke to investigators. They told me if I fought it, I'd lose everything. A woman clutched a photo of her children. I thought it was just me. Rebecca listened to every account. Not as a judge, as a witness. She understood something now that law books never taught. Justice doesn't fail all at once. It fails quietly, one ignored voice at a time. When the final report was released, its conclusion was unmistakable. This was a coordinated abuse of power rooted in racial profiling and protected by internal silence. Congressional hearings followed. Police training policies were rewritten. Oversight boards expanded. Whistleblower protection strengthened. And for the first time in that city's history, an independent federal monitor was appointed to oversee the department. Reporters once again gathered around Judge Lawson. "You could have let it go," one asked. "Why didn't you?" Rebecca didn't answer right away. She thought of the neighbors watching from their porches, of the victims whose names never made headlines, of the woman she had been that night, standing barefoot in her own doorway, forced to prove she belonged. "Because," she said finally, "I survived what others didn't have the power to fight." She looked straight into the camera. And the law only means something when it protects the people who need it most, not the people who wear it. Judge Rebecca Lawson wasn't the first victim, but she became the last one they could hide. The badge had been used as a weapon. And because of her, it would never be used that way again without consequence. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens or speeches. Sometimes it begins with a quiet refusal to look away. And sometimes it starts with a woman opening her own front door and deciding the truth would walk out with her. One false knock at 7:32 p.m. brought down an entire corruption network. Careers ended. Prison sentences followed. Reforms reshaped departments nationwide. Judge Rebecca Lawson returned to the bench, not as a victim, but as proof that justice still works. When someone refuses to stay silent, because power fades, lies collapse, and truth always leaves a record. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or inspired you, subscribe and stay with us. More stories like this are coming.